Usually Sarah and I do like a fireside chat with this,
Yeah,
where we have chairs, we kind of have a talk. So this is a bit awkward for us.
We're wondering if the filming will work if we do this.
Yes, if
Make
we,
it a little more.
I think there's another shot.
yeah, we're good here.
Okay.
The only difficulty is I literally have the shortest legs. And that went higher.
If you guys can pick
Here we
a
go.
side.
There's never an easy way to get on a stool.
Closer to Sarah, because then I'll get the PowerPoint on that side too.
Oh, okay.
Is that good?
See if this works.
That's great.
Maybe it'll be a bit more casual than
Yeah.
a lecture or something.
Okay.
Looks good.
This is very awkward and easy to do. Good thing I didn't wear a skirt.
You think?
Okay.
We're not on a big
Well, and this is kind of indicative of how it goes, right? In housing, you try something, you fall off, and then you try something again.
If we fall off, that's So we have a kind of an interesting makeup at the City of Calgary in terms of affordable housing, and that happened in 2015. City Council was having a lot of challenges with the large wholly owned entity that provides half of the housing, social housing stock, and also the city business related to affordable housing. So what City Council did in 2015 is they said, we want to put it all under one roof. And they appointed me through City Council as the president of Calgary Housing Company, which is our large traditional social housing provider as well as nonprofit housing provider, and to oversee affordable housing. And we've had a huge amount of progress in that area, aligning council priorities and the board. There's a board of directors that runs the entity. It's a private corporation that is wholly owned by the city. And so we have a common vision now in Calgary between the two entities, and we're working together very well. And Brian Pincott has done a lot of work on it. It has the chair at the time when that happened. And so the chair of the board and the city councilor. And so we're in a position now where we're actually united and moving forward on strategies, policies, and programs, and actually leveraging the benefits of being part of a municipality and providing service to people in need, as well as having a common voice politically at the local level. And so this is more about, this presentation is more about partnerships, but we're also trying to incorporate it into that concept of market rental housing and mixed market housing. And so our paper talks kind of about sort of three areas. Maybe I'll, maybe,
Yeah, and then the brilliance.
maybe we can't do it.
Maybe we can't do a fireside. Oh, here we go.
Yay! So we've kind of bucketed them into these three themes. A big focus of us, as with everybody else, is on housing supply, whether we're talking about financial benefits or actual bricks and mortar. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about scaling up the nonprofit sector in Calgary, and we've had huge success, but there's a lot of reasons why that's happening in Calgary in the last few years, and it's kind of based off what's happened over the last 20 years in the community. And so a bit about assessing your local system and understanding how to leverage what's there. And then also, it's not just about bricks and mortar. We can build and build and build affordable housing, but if we don't know what's happening to people being served, and all we're doing is putting people in a unit and having them have whatever happen to them, we're going to need to build and build and build a lot more, and we're going to talk about that. So there's a lot of work happening in Calgary about creating a strong system of housing, and that requires significant collaboration with the private sector, the nonprofit sector, agencies, and government. And so in terms of things that have happened sort of over the last 20-ish years, I started in 2001 at the City of Calgary, and at that time we were really excited because the federal government was back in the housing game, and they were providing funding for housing in Canada. Calgary wanted to access some of that funding, and so we did a bit of a study to see what would be the capacity of the nonprofit sector to deliver. We did a survey and some research, and it wasn't good. We had a whole bunch of nonprofits. There had been no funding, there had been no development or investment for many years, and they did not have the capacity to grow. They didn't have development expertise, they didn't have land, they didn't have access to operating dollars or capital. So at that time, the city started building. And that took a couple of years to ramp up as well, because the city didn't have expertise in it. Since that time, things have changed significantly. We had a lot of focus on homelessness. Homelessness was growing extensively in the city, And the City of Calgary decided to tackle that as a community. And we really shifted the thinking of building more and more shelters. The first year I moved here, we opened 2 huge, large shelters from federal funding in East Village. And there was a lot of publicity over that. Soon afterwards, we began to focus on, kind of over that 10 years, the housing first approach. And so the wraparound care, providing people that are chronically homeless with stabilization in a unit and then addressing their support needs. And so the community really came together to do that and created the 10-year plan to end homelessness. And I'm proud to say that we haven't ended homelessness, but when you see that we have a snowfall like today, we don't have problems like other cities in Canada where they don't have enough shelter space. We actually have enough shelter space, and that's because we've turned the curve. Our homeless rates have actually gone down a little bit despite significant growth periods in population. And that's because of a different way of working within the system to provide a service in a different way. So organizing each other to have citizen-centric services. And so the next thing that happened is the nonprofits were working away at this homeless sector and housing people. There just wasn't enough supportive housing. So there wasn't enough bricks and mortar stocks to actually help people move into housing first. And so what happened is they created a campaign called the Resolve Campaign. And so there were 9 agencies that fundraised $120 million. It took 6 years. They actually only fundraised 70, but all kinds of outcomes happened. The development industry backed it. The development industry supported by giving at cost materials and labor. And we were able to add, I think about not quite 2,000 units. And it's primarily from philanthropy that also leveraged federal and provincial dollars. But the output of that was we actually were able to, over time, have some agencies that can grow. And so now our focus in Calgary is on being able to continue to expand the nonprofit sector. Like everybody else, we have about 85 providers that provide some type of housing. Almost all of them are one building. We have a handful that have several hundred. And what we're trying to do in Calgary is help those individual organizations grow and attract new ones that want to establish themselves across Canada to have a stronger nonprofit sector. So we're going to talk about the tools that we're doing to do that in the presentation. We know a lot about our data and research in Calgary, and we have Claire and Cheryl here, who
are our research analysts.
Our research analysts.
So you have detailed questions.
Yeah.
We'll be diverting that over.
And our entire strategy is based off data. And so what we know in Calgary is that, unlike Toronto and Vancouver and other large cities, is we don't have a housing affordability problem right now. I was talking to Peel on Monday, Tuesday at another conference, and they're starting to see that. In Calgary, we're very fortunate that households earning over $80,000 a year, they are not overspending. They're only 4% are overspending. But households earning under $60,000 a year, they're overspending. And so that's our focus, is on low and moderate income households. Since 1991, low and moderate income households have not been able to afford housing in the marketplace. The marketplace has not stepped in. They're overspending, there's not enough housing stock, and the choice is bad. And so that's a flat number of about 18%. In Calgary, we have the smallest amount of rental housing. Only 7% of our total stock is rental housing. We need to double it to be average in Calgary to the rest of the large cities. We also need to double our non-market housing supply. We only have 3%, and we're looking for 6% just to become average. What we're trying to do on that slide is to narrow that pie down, that red area. We'd like to be able to figure out through planning and other mechanisms to have the private sector provide a greater proportion. In other Canadian cities, they're at about 82%. We have about 4%, whether it's lodging houses or secondary suites or other really entry-level housing that would be viable to build in the current market. We're looking at that, and then also adding the non-market housing supply to squeeze that red area as much as we can. Of course, income options are also part of that. In terms of supply, we also have a lot of opportunity because we don't have concentration areas of poverty. The area that's most concentrated with poverty in Calgary is a neighborhood that has a huge amount of seniors housing. People that are 85 years old and plus. And so when we look at this map, there's a lot of data on here, but the big piece about this map is policy really has impacted the form and locations of non-market housing in Calgary. Ward 9 has over 50% of the social housing that we manage at Calgary Housing, actually the full affordable housing that we manage. And that has to do with the time that the area is developed. We're predominantly a single detached market, and we grow during boom cycles. And so when rental housing was built in Canada, it was not a boom cycle. And so we didn't get the uptake of the federal programs at the time for rental housing. That's causing a lot of problems today. And so we have a lot of infographics. We know there's lots of people that like data. But that line at the top shows that we've had a consistent need of 18% of the households are not being served by the private market. And so what we're doing in our strategies through mixed market housing is we're able to provide housing to low and moderate income households targeting under $65,000 a year income of near market rent and social housing. That covers both of those segments that are not being met by the market.
So we're going to quickly close your eyes because I'm going to come back to the next slide. But we're going to talk first a little bit about the company and what the company does and the different functions the company provides, just to give a snapshot.
So Calgary Housing Company provides about 50% of the non-market rental housing stock currently. What we want to do is we want to grow the pie in Calgary. Calgary Housing Company needs to regenerate a lot of properties that are aging and move to mixed use, mixed market as operating agreements expire, and hopefully target no net loss. So we're moving from a regulator, punitive type traditional housing body that follows rules and regulations for social housing to an innovative nonprofit. We have about 1,200 units that are mixed market today. The city created that program in the late 90s. What we do is we have limited capital debt and financing so that we can have the deepest amount of rents as possible. We have reserves, and we've returned $25 million in surplus revenue to the city to invest back into affordable housing. There's no operating subsidies. And so the capital dollars help us have limited debt. We can provide housing at a fairly deep subsidy of $350 a month, including utilities, and also rent units to people at near market rents. And so that's the market that we're going to. The problem is social housing provides so much stock to so many low-income people. You need about 1-to-5 ratio to not lose the number of households served in that model. So this is a little bit of a snapshot of who calls Calgary Housing Company home. I'm not talking a lot about people today, and usually we actually do. We have storytelling in almost every presentation. Teresa has a little bit today, and the importance and guiding focus for us at Calgary Housing Company is people. And so what we do is we provide housing. Why we do it is to make life better for Calgarians through housing. And so what we're working towards is understanding when people come in the door, are they better off than where they came from before? And when they leave, are they better off? And if they're not, if they're falling through the cracks, what are the various challenges that they're experiencing that we can partner with other agencies to help reduce the negative exits? And so that's the journey that we're on right now. And what better off means is self-defined. It's self-defined by the individual that lives in Calgary Housing Company. So in Alberta, we're kind of talking a lot about trying to understand this, wellness and outcomes. We know in general that 65% of people leaving Calgary Housing Company are moving into the private sector market. We have 1,800 moves a year, and we have a fairly mobile housing sector compared to other municipalities. With social housing, we also don't, we evict when people exceed the core need income threshold in Alberta. That's very different than other places in Canada. So what people do is they quit their jobs, they make tough choices about whether their kids can stay in their house or not. And so we're working on some policies to be less punitive, but also trying to focus on optimizing the stock, because we actually are creating customers for the private sector in some cases, and we want to continue to be able to do that so we can optimize what we have. We also have people who may start a chess club or volunteer in a community event. They may always live in Calgary Housing Company, and that's fantastic. Our goal is to continue helping individuals to thrive while they're living in Calgary Housing Company. This slide I'll just touch on. You'll have it in your material. We manage 8 different housing programs. We had 37 bankers boxes of housing agreements that we're going through right now. We're actually renegotiating with the federal and provincial government this, because the agreements start to expire, and 1,000 units that are social housing now won't be social housing in by 2024. And so we're working on what that means. This is the current rent bands that we have for 8 different housing portfolios. Right now, people are treated like widgets. They have to meet criteria. When they meet the criteria, they live in the home. When they don't meet the criteria, they don't live in that home. So there's a lot of problems with stability. What we're working towards is moving towards a system where the program goes with the household, like in the mixed market. They don't have to move if they don't want to move. And we can change the program that they're on and balance the funding for that portfolio. And so we can have a lot more housing stability and choice, and also build strong communities so that people aren't forced to move like they're widgets. And so this just kind of gives you an idea, but we would be going to kind of a mix, probably about a third, a third, a third. And we also provide rent supplements. It's $19 million a year to provide 2,300 rent subs. I receive $18 million a year to provide 4,500 social housing units, which is almost funded at a proper operating rent now. So rent supplements are fantastic tools. Calgary is a boom-bust city. We could really use them right now. In other periods of time, landlords don't like using the rent subs, and then we don't have houses to give rent subs for, because when the market's tight, people like that, they want the higher income owners. So it's a good tool. We love that tool. We're proud to administer it. It's just another option in the toolbox.
So I'm going to talk about the city strategy. So the way that the city group works is I have a whole team that actually does capital development, so brand new housing being brought on 2 to 3 developments per year. And then I have another whole part of my team, which is basically I call them the steward of this strategy. And the strategy was created with these 6 objectives, some really focusing on building, some of them focusing on people and improving the housing system. And that was important to balance those 2. Today I really want to talk about the tools that we've been using to scale up. We had a great conversation yesterday about what's happening in BC, and one of the things that I'm really, like the city is proud of is we fulfill a lot of the administrative backbones to things, but we want to be the matchmaker. We don't want to be the doer. And someone asked me yesterday, well, how are you going to get to this average? Like, I never strive for average, for the record, but how are you going to get to average? And I was like, well, we're going to do 1,000, but I'm going to rely on the rest of the sector to deliver 14. And the way I'm going to do it is by this. We're going to provide land. We're going to provide expedited approvals, and Nina Nagy, who's in the purple over here, is our affordable housing development coordinator that's embedded in the planning department. If you have questions about her role, please speak to her. And she's really the shepherd. So when a new application comes in, it gets a prioritized sheet, like a red sheet that basically says, if you're working on this and this red sheet comes to your desk, the red sheet goes to the top. We're recognizing that affordable housing is a business, that time is money, and the longer that the approvals take, the less units that will be delivered because of the time, the cost associated with the time. And then the city here, not everywhere. I like to caveat this because we were in Ottawa, and a lady came up to me at the end and was like, well, it must be nice to have land, because the last time the city provided us land, this was a member of the nonprofit, she said, it had a train that ran underneath, it had 2 utility right-of-ways, and it had like a telecommunications tower that I couldn't do anything on. And I was like, oh no, I'm sorry. But I will say, in Calgary, we are fortunate to have a lot of land holdings. And one of the balances that we're working with our real estate development department is, we have a mandate in our real estate department to maximize revenue so that we can generate money to do all the other things we have at the city. And I always laugh because my mandate is actually to give it all away and to make sure that we can really scale the rest of the sector up. So our council actually said, let's balance this so that every time our real estate manager or director comes to council, they don't say, nope, this is going to affordable housing. Nope, this is going to affordable housing. Now he can come forward and actually say, we have a nice segment here that's going to go on every 2 years, up to 10 parcels of land, and the rest of it he is able to sell at the market value. So that it kind of balances those 2 pieces. And last year was our inaugural year that we did this, the first time. We received 12 applications on 7 parcels, and we sold 6 out of the 7. The one was had a little bit of There was another application that had some community opposition, so nobody actually applied for that one. And the great thing, I remember one of our councillors saying, well, we don't want to get bogged down in all the administration of doing this. We want to light these things up. We want to get them out there. And so from start to finish, it was, looking at Nina, 107 days for planning approvals.
Yeah, 4 months. 4 months for DP.
4 months, land use and DP. 4 months from the beginning to the end. And then on top of that, we worked collaboratively with our friends that are in the back there to really stack our programs at CMHC. So everything that we provided, we said, we're not the experts in like the financial pieces. So let's work together to be able to stack that funding or anything else that's coming. And then the province actually called us as well because there was a call out at the exact same time for the capital development projects. And the province called us because what was happening is the chicken and an egg, right? They were saying, the province was like, yeah, this is a great proposal, but you need land. And the city was like, yeah, this is a great proposal, but you need land. And so we were like, we'll provide the land if you can get the development and the capital and the operating together. And they were evaluated, the applications were evaluated on that. And we'll kind of just zoom through. So prioritize planning approvals and the housing incentive program. So this is fee rebates to the city planning fees, have produced 2,000 units in 2 years. Now we recognize there was a huge backlog in our sector that waited for this kind of stimulus for a long time, but we're pretty proud that the city could act as that matchmaker in that. And that if there was just that one last bit, so feasibility money or prioritized planning or land, that we could really contribute to that. And so this is kind of a snapshot of those of that nonprofit land transfer program that I was speaking of. The other part that I really wanted to touch on in the last couple minutes is about improving the housing system. And this part I would say is like a little special piece of my heart, because for everything that we do on the capital side, and I put my hat on as a developer that I love, this is also a really special part. And this is about getting community ambassadors and working with people to become community advocates that already live in affordable housing. So giving a voice to those that probably would otherwise not be participating in their community at the community association table. And this is a snapshot, but so the community mobile market actually was just on a side note, we provided some capital funding to that. That was a wholesale community. There was a lot of funders to that, and that brings food at wholesale cost into areas of the city that don't have like a large chain grocery store. So people often were going to 7-Eleven to buy their groceries, which we know is like $9 for a jug of milk. And so this is really like responding to that kind of local context level through an organization that takes leftovers, good food from some parts of the city and brings it to other parts. So really matchmaking is part of that. And then I want to really talk about this because this is something that came up through the community. And so the Community Housing Affordability Collective, I will not take any credit for this. This is really, we are one member of many, like I think there's 50 organizations now that make up all 3 levels of government. And really this collective is a working group. So it isn't like we're sitting around just talking about change. We actually have work items, subcommittees, and we're putting together, so when the National Housing Strategy, the view on housing as a human right or housing benefit, we were able to come together and put a uniform response from this group. And I think, like what we heard yesterday, was that kind of resonates, and those pieces really have resonated. And as kind of a trickle-down effect, we realize we are better together. And so rather than saying, we're all competing for the same money and let's like devalue some against others, this has been the exact opposite. This has said, we all are special and create parts of this system, and if our part is working and your part is not, or vice versa, then the system is going to be broken.
And it's co-chaired by development industry and nonprofit.
Yeah, that's the real like kicker. So Build.
Martina's the chair, she's not here, but.
Yeah, Build Alberta, which is like the Home Builders Association for Alberta, is one of them is a co-chair, and we really wanted to make sure that that was part of it. So with that, I want to leave one last thought. So we talked yesterday about this YIMBY and the campaign. Actually, last night I didn't come to supper because I was at I don't think we're going to have time for that. But I was at a condominium board meeting, and they were really upset because we're creating 62 units beside their 1,000 unit development. And they were extremely upset because they really were like, we don't understand like who's coming here and what you're doing. And I took them through this. And at the end, I had this moment with them to say, you know, the people that are gonna live in our housing, because housing, are already living in your building, and they're just spending 40 or 50% every month. And what we're doing is we're creating a campaign. We've created a campaign that is showcasing in a very respectful, this was our main priority, respectful, to bring a face to those people that are those people or different people. And this goes on the YIMBY campaign that we were talking about.
My name is Tariq, and this is my affordable housing story. I have a 17 years experience in banking, but unfortunately the Canadian customs actually or regulation do not recognize my Lebanese experience, so it's been very tough for me to find a proper job, especially in my medical condition where I cannot perform hard physical work. When I first was contacted by the Calgary Housing Corporation people, I was really surprised and astonished. We don't have such services provided to anyone back home. This is my house where I will take care of my wife, of my two kids. You feel warm, you feel the belonging. I belong here. Calgary Housing Corporation for me did not care about my religion, did not care about my color. She cared about one thing and only one thing, about the human being that I was. I am a father, I have a disability, and I have two kids, and I am taking care of those two kids. And I promise myself to be a good member to prove for the Calgary Housing I deserve what they did for me as caring for the human being, and I will repay it someday.
You use that, right, for your engagement?
Yeah, so we use this in our engagement. We have 4 videos that we play, just talking about how this is the very foundation of our responsibility. So with that, if you need a Kleenex, don't worry, I cry literally every time I talk. And these are all real people. Mm-hmm. Like, we didn't hire actors. So someone asked me.
Yeah. Really?
That was an
Oh,
actor.
wow.
I was like, come on. Anyways, thank you for allowing us to come here and talk.